We asked you before the break if you could name the worst hurricane in 2010. Well, the question was a little deceiving because no hurricanes hit the U.S. last year, but the worst tropical system in the U.S. was Tropical Storm Hermine right here in central Texas with damage estimates over $250 million. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about flooding because it's so dangerous here in central Texas, but killer tornadoes have also brought misery to our area over the years. Here's what Paul Ura teaches spotters about those terrible twisters.
Tornado Alley, middle part of the country, where we have the majority of our large, big tornadoes. This is where all the extra ingredients come together to actually have tornado outbreaks and very large tornadic thunderstorms. We're on the very southern edge of anything like that. Typically, parts of North Texas and West Texas have an abundance of tornadoes, but South Central Texas, we tend to stay clear of any of the major tornado outbreaks. So let's talk about some quick definitions. First, a funnel cloud. A funnel cloud is not touching ground. A funnel cloud is a rotating column of air attached to the bottom of the actual thunderstorm, working its way down. It could become a tornado, but like in this picture here, if you see it only about halfway down to the ground, it's still only called a funnel cloud. A tornado is actually touching ground. It's a funnel that makes its way all the way to ground. Sometimes the funnel is not even visible. However, there is a debris cloud at the bottom on ground showing that the contact is occurring. The column of air is rotating counterclockwise and is pulling up debris and sucking it back up into the thunderstorm. A Minneapolis, Minnesota tornado showing 30 and 40-foot trees getting sucked up into the actual thunderstorm. If you watch closely, you can see the storm and the trees being thrown in all directions as they are sucked up out of ground. This is a moderate-sized tornado with moderate winds of probably less than 150 miles per hour. Dr. Theodore Fujita created a scale for us to use. We call it the Enhanced Fujita Scale. It's a scale to measure tornadoes. The majority of tornadoes across the country, and particularly South Central Texas, are the weakest tornadoes, the EF0 and EF1s. They may be only lasting a few minutes on the ground for less than a quarter mile and only about 20 or 30 yards wide. This is a videotape of a weak tornado going through a parking lot in Alabama. Even though it is a weak tornado, it still has a lot of force, enough force to crash these vehicles together and to toss even one of them into a nearby ditch. As the tornadoes get bigger, they get stronger, they get wider, and they get on the ground longer. This accumulates tornadic deaths because of more flying debris and winds in excess of 165 miles per hour. They can last up to 20 minutes, and they cause considerable damage. One of the biggest dangers, of course, is to mobile homes, where 50% of all the tornadic fatalities occur. It's because the homes can be picked up and thrown, like in this picture here, thrown around and wrapped around a telephone pole. A much higher death rate in and around mobile home parks and travel trailers. The biggest and most violent tornadoes are the Enhanced Fujita Scale 4 and 5 tornadoes, much like the Gerald tornado back in 1997 just north of Austin. These tornadoes are very rare, but they accumulate 70% of all the fatalities. They can be on the ground for more than 100 miles and up to 2 miles wide, with winds of in excess of 200 miles per hour. This videotape of an ATM camera at a bank in Parkersburg, Iowa, shining across the street as a tornado, an EF5 tornado, approaches from the left-hand side. It'll start to get very dark, and you'll actually start to see the flying debris start to rain down on the area. That's your clue that a tornado is quickly approaching. The flashes of light you see are debris hitting power lines and transformers, and then you see the neighbor's house disappear, and then finally the house right across the street as the roof is torn off and the rest of the house is destroyed. The safest place to be in a tornado is the interior room of a house or business on the lowest floor. You want to stay away from windows, but the interior room is important because you want to put as many walls between you and the tornado. Those walls will actually slow down the flying debris and keep you safe.
Now, that is exactly what happened to a person I recently met who is here only today because he followed that advice. Last May, a string of tornadic storms developed over Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. More than 60 tornadoes were reported on May 10th, and I spoke with a man who almost lost everything when his home was hit by an EF4 tornado in Harrah, Oklahoma.
I told my wife, I don't want you going out today. Kind of stay close to home.
As a meteorologist, Bob Duncombe knew it was going to be a busy weather day.
When it came down to it, there was one particular storm that I could tell would be on a track that would put it pretty close to us, so we were kind of excited.
It was a storm moving through Moore, Oklahoma, and headed for Harrah. When the power went out, the excitement ended. 6 of Bob's children and his first grandchild went to an 8x5 underground shelter in the garage. Bob continued to watch out the kitchen window.
I saw debris flying up about half mile to our southwest, and I yelled out to my family, close the door. and I ran to a closet thinking there was no room in our shelter for me.
Within minutes, Bob says the closet rattled violently and the roof lifted off the house, and seconds later, it was still. He walked out of the closet unscathed, surviving a violent EF4 tornado.
I'm coming out with socks, and there's nails and boards and wires everywhere.
The house, though, was destroyed, and that's when worry set in.
I didn't believe my wife had gone to the shelter. She doesn't do shelters, and so when I came out of the closet, my first thought was, I need to find her.
He searched what was left of the master bedroom and the living room.
Until I hollered to the kids in the shelter, "You guys okay?" "Yes." "Is Mom in there?" "Yes." I was relieved to, you can't even imagine.
And now with severe weather season gearing up again, there are uneasy feelings left behind.
I travel with my work sometimes, and I have a trip coming up in mid-April, and it's at the forefront of our minds now. My wife is worried. Like, I don't want you to leave during tornado season. It becomes something you now think about that maybe you didn't think about before.
Natalie Stoll, KXAN Austin News. Now, Bob and his family moved into a new home. The first thing they did was build an underground shelter large enough for all of them. Bob also says it's because of that storm that he'll never storm chase again.